Tonight I'm going to share with you some of the amazing epiphanies I've had whilst writing my book. In case you don't know yet, I'm writing my book, and whilst writing this book, I've had some amazing epiphanies, and I've had great healing go on whilst writing my book. I'm going to read out to you from what I've written on the pages of this amazing book, hot off the press. It's raw. My transgender, and I put this in trans/gender, so I hope you get the picture. Audacity in an ego-driven world really didn't care if other people set the standards. Also bearing in mind, I was struggling at the time, and I was in pain as a result of the abortion we had to have. We had to have an abortion, and you understand the ultra-Orthodox Jewish world, you understand how much hesitation would go into doing that, but we had no choice at the time due to a situation where the fetus, my offspring, hadn't been alive for 3 weeks already. Nonetheless, my transgender spirit was not going to keep me down. It suggested that I take care of the true essence that lived inside of me. What? During this time? How could you do that? That's so insensitive. To which my trans/gender spirit responded, well, I am not here to be suffocated. I don't have to suffocate just because breathing people are angry at God over something he did. I felt cruel. I felt sin-driven. I felt selfish. I felt egoistic. But in reality, it was the other way around. It was egoistic, selfish, sin-driven, cruel, to ignore part of you, to ignore yourself because your parents, your community, your culture said to do so. Even if they twisted and interpreted whatever part of the Bible they chose to. That doesn't actually define how you are to live your life. Now, in no way am I coming to undermine people's beliefs and people's interpretation of the Bible, however they interpret it. In no way am I coming to undermine that or tell them how to do that. I'm just telling you how I interpreted the situation in hindsight. It's quite an epiphany. And even when circumstances showed up to somehow imply that a reinterpreted God now wants you to conform, to forget yourself, to be considerate, and not care about yourself in the process, well, suffice to say that I did not conform, but I concealed my actions and my feelings. What is it that we are doing when we decide to listen to our inner voice? Why? Why do we think that our spirit could somehow be silenced? What is it when you have a trans/gender identity or transgender identity, which is stronger and more confident than you have ever thought it to be? Being transgender is about a force which emanates from a previous life reincarnated in order to complete its mission. That force has a flame and a divine presence far greater and way more dominant than it is given credit for. My experience has taught me that my sole purpose is way stronger than any temporary, passing ego, any mortal being's determination to silence it. It laughs at those who tried to hurt it and took everything away from it. And took away from it its earthly possessions. It laughs at mortal beings who are so driven by shame, greed, separation, and illusionary definitions of an angry God. It feels compelling to want to define transgender as a unwanted, disturbing entity which shouldn't be allowed to exist lest it take away people's security blanket. But it is impossible to silence God, nor is it possible to push God away with a passing, temporary definition of God's intentions. I'm going to repeat that. It feels compelling to want to define transgender as an unwanted, disturbing entity which shouldn't be allowed to exist lest it take away people's security blanket. But it is impossible to silence God, nor is it possible to push God away with a passing, temporary definition of God's intentions. My transgender self is not desperate, nor does it feel a need for other people to recognize, acknowledge, validate, and accept it. It is not drawn, nor does it care to get the approval of beings who have an alternate agenda. I faced abandonment, first by myself and then by others. That never silenced the flame divinely driven within me. That is quite an epiphany to have, I must tell you. I never thought I would see things from that light. Wow. Another epiphany I had was, I realized while I was writing my book a couple of days ago, reminiscing an unbelievable incident which took place on my flight to Israel way back in 1996. I realized that a certain individual I met at the airport helped me in more ways than I ever realized. Here's the story. I'll give you the background to the story. It's a bit of a long one, so I hope you'll bear with me for this one. I was really excited. At 18 years old, I was going to be heading off to study in a yeshiva in Israel. I was all of 18, off to a foreign country. I'd never left the comfort of Brooklyn, New York. Okay, I had been to different cities, different states, New Jersey, a little bit, upstate New York, but for the most part, about 90% of my life thus far, I was living in Brooklyn, New York. I had lived in Brooklyn, New York for that matter. And I was going to be heading off to Israel to study in yeshiva. I actually met the dean of the yeshiva in another state I had been to at the time. It was Pennsylvania. I met the dean of the yeshiva's nephew, and he seemed to be really pleasant, and we happened to be related as well. So all seemed well. I'm just giving you a background to the story. All seemed well. Off to Israel. I'm related to the dean of the yeshiva, the dean of the seminary. I'm related to his nephew, and his nephew seemed pleasant and great. Exciting. We're off to Israel. I get a ticket. I paid for it with my own money, because I was excited and didn't care how I was going to do this. So I took $866 to be exact of my own money, and I paid for the ticket. And I bought a ticket on standby. Standby? What's that? You might be asking. Standby actually means a ticket which you aren't guaranteed to get onto the flight. You might get onto the flight, you might not. If you don't get into the flight, you're hoping to get bumped to the next flight, so to speak. I was like, what do I know about flying? 18-year-old kid, never flown before. Get to the airport, they're like, sorry, there's no room on the flight. I'm like, what am I gonna do? I was there with my dad. And we happened to bump into this Israeli kid. I think he was 22 years old, something like that. I was 18, he was 22, maybe 21. I don't know what his age was. Bump into him, he's like, don't worry guys, I'll help you out. I'll get you onto another flight. Don't worry about it. And this Israeli kid somehow got me onto another flight for the next day. He stayed in my house overnight. Nice Israeli Jewish kid. Stays in my house overnight. Pretty daring thing to do. We did it. This is an unbelievable story. And I actually spoke about the story, not this part of the story, not this element of the story, but the continuance of the story. I spoke about it on the radio in Israel about a year and a half later. Because the continuance of the story, it's an amazing story. But just listen to this part. We get onto the flight. Yeah, it all works out fine. We get onto the flight the next day. And I'm really enjoying it. I'm sitting in business class and the sun sets. Now, bearing in mind, I'm also escaping my transgender identity whilst doing this. What do I mean by that? Well, moved to yeshiva, and whilst I was in my comfort zone, I did do things to entertain my transgender identity. In other words, I did whatever I could to survive and wear the clothing when I was able to. And I couldn't do any of that whilst flying abroad, and that was my plan, to cut this off, get rid of it. We get onto the plane. I'm sitting in business class. It's nice and pleasant. That's how you fly. What do I know about flying as an 18-year-old kid, right? Sitting in business class and enjoying the sunsets. We're taking off. We're going to fly to Paris, and the following flight is going to be to Tel Aviv. Happy days. I'm loving it. It feels so cool. It feels amazing. I'm an 18-year-old kid enjoying the movie on the flight. Great stuff. We arrive in Paris, and then to the continuing flight to Israel. And I'm all of a sudden sardined. I'm like, what? Why am I sardined on this flight? Why am I not sitting like I sat on the previous flight? But I was. That's just, I learned very quickly that you were lucky you got to sit in business class before, and now you are sitting in economy class on a full flight. Okay. We're sitting there on the plane, and my friend, my Israeli friend, my Jewish Israeli friend, is working things out. I don't know when he arranged this, but he got in touch with the Israeli government, and he arranged that when we arrive in Israel, we're arriving right before the Sabbath, 45 minutes before the Sabbath. So there's no way we're gonna be made to go through passport control. I didn't know this. He made all these plans. I'm all excited. I'm arriving in Israel. Yeah, first time. I'm super excited. Yeah. I look from abroad. I look from above, from below. It's beautiful. I'm arriving in Israel. What do I know? I'm just a kid thinking about the Sabbath. Didn't even enter my mind at the time. We arrive in Israel. My friend's like, we gotta run. Just come with me. Grab your stuff and run. We gotta make it before the Sabbath. His uncle picks us up from the airport. It's a 20-minute drive to Bnei Brak. And then I stay in his house overnight, Saturday, and then he takes me down to my yeshiva. I learned some unbelievable things that's my first day in Israel. My first day in a foreign country. My first day leaving the comfort zone of where I lived just for my entire life. Just breathe that in for a second. my Israeli friend, I just met, who, by the way, I only met twice again thereafter in my life. My Israeli friend doesn't just let me stay in his house over the Sabbath, over the weekend. He also takes me to my new yeshiva. And that was my epiphany I had whilst writing this book. It took me 25 years to realize, hey, do you realize this kid helped you get onto a flight, which was pretty cool and amazing. I don't know how I would have done it myself. I had no idea, but I wouldn't have known how to argue my case and get onto another flight. Help you get into a flight. Help you skip passport control. Wait, this doesn't end. This is an unbelievable story. Help you skip passport control because the Sabbath was coming. Helps you get to the new yeshiva, which is so happens to have been a 5-minute walk from your yeshiva, from my yeshiva, from my seminary. So you understand what's going on here. He so happens, coincidentally, right? If you believe in coincidence, if you still believe in coincidence up until now. Coincidentally, his seminary was 5 minutes away from my seminary. He helps me get onto a flight. I stay in his house in Israel. I never really met the guy again in my life. And then, this is the unbelievable part of the story. My luggage somehow got lost in the flight as a result of what happened. Maybe it was because of the transfer. I'm not sure exactly why it got lost, but it got lost. And because it got lost, and they gave it to me about 2.5 weeks later, they compensated me. They gave me about $800, which allowed me to go to my sister's wedding and go home for Passover. It was one incident after another incident after another incident, which I've only managed to put together with a nice ribbon and see the beautiful hand of God in all of it, the beautiful hand of the universe in all of it. Amazing epiphany. I'm so glad I was able to share with you. I look forward to your amazing comments in the comment section down below. I love your feedback. It's super important to me. Thank you for leaving it. I'm ever so grateful. And if you haven't subscribed yet, subscribe now and press the like button as well. I share amazing insights, great ideas. I'm going to be sharing a lot more about my book, but I'm also going to be talking about my spiritual journey, which is still ongoing. Fascinating stuff. We are an amazing group together. I look forward to your amazing comments, and I want to thank the amazing subscribers who have joined me and joined us in the last few weeks and months. I'm humbled. I'm ever so grateful. Thank you, all of you. You touched my heart. I look forward to your amazing comments and feedback. Have a great evening. I look forward to seeing your amazing comments.